Let's get right into it. To recap, I did have to trailer the car from my parents' house to my house in Springfield, so here's the B-roll from that stuff. This is a good time to remember that I've owned the car for about 6 years now, and I've driven it only 1,000 miles, because of the random problems that it's been experiencing. With it at my house in Springfield, I tried to fit it in the garage, and it did technically fit, but there was no way you could walk around the car. So, looks like we're going to be doing this project in the carport, slightly in the cold weather. I had insurance, but I didn't have registration tags up to date. Luckily, I lived a mile from the DMV, so I drove there at 8 a.m. when it was cold out, and the Dart did its best to sputter down the road, but I checked literally nothing before I started driving it. The ethanol regular gas was about 2 years old and it ran rough at first, but then cleaned itself out as the Slant 6 warmed up. I got to the DMV just to find out that they no longer do walk-ins anymore, and that to renew my tags I could drive 8 miles across town to a kiosk in a department store to get new ones. But before I would make that drive, I would actually check over the vitals of the 64 and make sure it was up to the challenge. First, I finally did what I should have done before starting it to get onto the trailer or even drive it 2 miles to the DMV and back, and finally I checked the oil. Well, good thing they love running a quart low, because it's a quart and a half low. The oil appeared to be about a quart and a half low. I thought I had a jug in the trunk from the old daily driving days, but it was gone, so my spare Kirkland oil was used. With that topped off and the pre-driving checks starting off with not great news, I decided to check the brake master cylinder. The bolt came out fine, but the cover seemed to have slightly rust-welded itself on. When I finally got it to pop off, the fluid didn't look great, but it was acceptable for driving slowly across town. I topped it off too and tried to clean the mating surface with a rag and friction. When I eventually talked to my dad about all this, I think he said there was supposed to be a rubber gasket to keep the fluid from slowly leaking out, which mine didn't have. If you know, please leave a comment. I love learning tips from you guys online. So, with the brake master cylinder cap reinstalled, I checked the auto trans fluid, as it does have a leak since I dented the trans pan removing it to replace the trans filter earlier. It was also low, so I topped it off and closed the hood. The squeaky hinges on everything were finally annoying enough to me that I sprayed them down to try and shut them up. Then I realized there was one fluid on the Dart I had literally never checked before: the coolant. The coolant was fine, it wasn't all the way full, but that made sense because it didn't have an overflow reservoir. And the fluid itself wasn't full-on rust sludge coolant, but it also definitely wasn't fresh either. So I pulled out about 18 ounces and topped it back up with fresh antifreeze. I think that'll be just fine like that, as it really doesn't get very cold here in the wintertime. So I closed the hood again and it was time to check the tire pressures. I was expecting one to be really low due to a super slow leak I noticed years ago, but they were all around 28 psi. So I pumped them up to 40 psi, which made the steering way easier to turn with them overinflated. I splashed in a gallon or so of gas to help ensure I could make the 18-mile round-trip journey, and I reloaded the trunk with my emergency Dart stuff kit, including the old Mopar dedicated tow strap. As I drove down the road, I made mental notes of everything that was wrong with the Dart, which is not the most fun game to play. The sound of the broken speedometer whipping around was really annoying. It sounded like a drill spinning a rock against metal with a random bell ringing whenever the speedo would hit 100 miles an hour. The heater defrost puller got stuck, so I couldn't blow hot air on the windshield, but the wipers did work when it started misting. Then I drove past a cop and didn't get pulled over, which means to me that the Dart passed the tech inspection. Then there was this guy high as a kite on Eugene marijuana products at 11 a.m. and tried to sideswipe me, but I made my way to the kiosk location. I parked, walked in, just to find out that I couldn't renew my tags again, which was even more annoying. So I left and headed back home. But first, a quick stop at the locksmith to get a second set of keys made, and at this point the gas gauge was reading really weird and looked like it was on empty 6 miles from home. So I got scared and I pulled over to pour in the rest of the gas I had in the trunk and hoped it was enough to make it home. I hit the highway and noticed the windshield moss, which reminded me that the car hadn't been washed yet. And then I drove past the location where the Dart broke down years ago when the gas pedal broke, which felt like a redemption in a way. Finally, I was back home. When I was home, I went on the DMV website and ordered new registration to come in the mail, but I also ordered a brand new gas tank and fuel sending unit with gaskets for the Dart to fix the main fuel leak. With even more parts on the way, it was time to start deep cleaning the Dart now that we're finally starting the daily driver project. The inside had a bunch of stuff to clean out or organize, and everything was either old car stinky, dusty, or greasy. The interior was not in the best condition overall, but we did need to start somewhere. Most of the stuff in the back seat was a box of parts I mentioned in the previous video that I had bought years ago and never installed. And also some other random car-related odds and ends. The seats were all ripped up and damaged, so the blankets in the seats were there to try to improve the cosmetics by the previous owner. Let's take a look at the inventory of goodies from the interior excluding the glove box. We have rat poison, a wire, and an old Texaco receipt. Alright, so with the garbage thrown away, we check out the fingerless driving gloves, a few feet of rubber fuel line, hand sanitizer from the 2020 era, some random battery tie-down parts so I can eventually relocate the battery in the trunk for better weight distribution and handling. I'm hoping the extra weight in the trunk helps with traction because with the open diff, if I drive on the gravel at my parents' house, it just wants to dig itself into a hole. If you know the least expensive way for me to get a limited slip differential for my Dart, please let me know in the comments. I really want a limited slip diff without overspending on it, or without changing the wheel bolt pattern, hopefully if possible. Anyways, next we can appreciate my MR2 cardboard silhouette I made in 2008, and my dad gave me the spare instrument cluster from his spare parts he still has. And we also have this doily which came included with the purchase of the Dart and looks totally grandma style on the back seat, which I actually really like. Next we have the backpack my parents wore in the 90s when we had the original 64 Dart. And inside it was some old emergency water and a coffee shop beanie. Cool! Alright, next we finally make it to the cardboard box of parts, where we find the spare gas pedal I bought when mine broke in 2022. I couldn't use it though because it doesn't have the part to connect to the linkage I think, so the ugly bolt setup stays. Then we have the armrest for the front passenger seat which broke off, some bags of wheel lug stuff, and a bag with a kit which adapts newer starters to the original wiring. Then there are 2 new engine mounts, and 4 brand new cheapy shocks. A seemingly random but maybe important socket, and then more wheel lug things. With inventory completed, I ended the first day just working on cleaning it to feel less gross all over. Wiping down the dash and especially the steering wheel was awesome because it just always felt so gross. So with the basic wash completed, I started it up, drove it back into the carport, and then looked over the interior again before giving it a vacuum job. If you're watching this and you know how or where I can get much nicer seats by repairing them or replacing them, please let me know in the comments because this interior is sad for sure. Same thing for the headliner, it would be amazing to have a brand new one. I vacuumed the disgusting carpet but did not do anything with the wet vacuum, and I sprayed Cleanish the floor mats and hung them to dry. I decided to wash the seat blankets and the doilies so that when I put them all back in the car it would smell more like fresh laundry and not old nasty car smell. But the washing machine was too powerful and destroyed the doily and one of the back seat blankets. I was so sad the doily was already dead this early in the adventure. Oh well. I cleaned the washing machine before my wife came home and saw the washing machine crime scene, and then I decided to annoy myself by looking at how dirty the engine bay was. I mean, there's real nasty stuff in here. Now that the car was now sorta clean, the next thing Dad and I did on a different day with the Dart was replace the gas tank. The gas tank itself was fine. It looked like it had never been removed before, which was cool, and it was essentially rust-free. The leak looked like it was coming from the fuel sender gasket. However, I had already bought the tank and the new fuel sender and gaskets, so we decided just to do all of it and refurbish the gas tank for a different Mopar project we want to do later. With the tank and fuel sender and sending gasket replaced, I filled the tank up all the way and discovered the gasket grommet thing that goes with the fuel neck into the fuel tank. Well, that rubber thing might have been original and it was now our new leak. So, a different day, I bought and installed a new one. And also, my dad had taken apart the gas filler cap and made a new rubber thicker gasket so that the fuel would not be able to leak out the filler neck anymore under cornering. This is an old car feature I really didn't like. Fuel shooting out of it under cornering. But so far with minimal miles tested, the fuel leaks from the tank are all fixed. We may still have a fuel leak at the carburetor, but it's small enough that I'm not ready to throw effort into it. I was super excited about the fuel system now because this was a big hurdle to overcome if I was ever going to be able to experiment with making a handling-oriented daily driver 64 four-door Dodge Dart. And if the gas was going to slosh out or leak, then there was no way the local club was going to let me race autocross with it, which is another goal of mine. Alright, so with the tank fixed, I actually drove it to work 3 days in a row. Let's just say daily driving the Dart was a little bit more exciting than I was hoping it was going to be. I started with what the fuel gauge said was 7/8 of a tank, and after about 110 miles of highway driving in the colder winter weather, it was reading at only 1/8 of fuel remaining. This confused me because I was expecting better fuel economy from an economy car-oriented Slant 6. I didn't get to officially do the fuel economy numbers, but it seemed like it was maybe only 18 miles per gallon, which was way under what I had been hoping for with the car to accomplish on the highway. But as of yet, I have not done yet a full correct test of the commuting highway fuel economy with official numbers. So until then, if you want to tell me what gas mileage you get in your Dodge Dart, I can maybe try to lower my expectations. Finally, the last thing we did to the Dart for this chapter of the story is we spent a weekend fixing and replacing the trunk's weather stripping. I knew before I even bought the Dart it would leak water into the trunk, and if this thing was going to be a year-round daily driver candidate, it needed to be able to reliably keep water out. So, this $20 gasket kit from Classic Industries was installed. First, we stripped off the old gasket, which showed us actually how much surface rust the car had. So we stripped that rust back as well, and then I cleaned it up really good. Then I sprayed it with primer, and then I sprayed it with generic beige spray paint I bought at the department store. And that was it for Saturday's progress on the trunk. We wanted to give the paint overnight to dry and harden before we glued on the new weather stripping with Magic Goop. So, before Dad left on Saturday, we also changed the exhaust manifold collector gasket, since the one on the car was super dunzo. Look at that sweet gap. I'm embarrassed to admit, but I didn't realize the gasket missing gap was so huge and the obvious sound difference that was going to make. Because I am so unused to 60s cars that I thought that the shitty exhaust sound was just natural to the Slant 6. But with the new gasket installed and the leak is fixed, it is so much quieter. You can actually hear the valve train working now, which is really cool when it's idling. And the exhaust smell inside the cabin was also fixed, which was a big bonus. The other thing we did was rust treat the trunk lid itself because it was showing plenty of surface rust that I didn't like. So, Saturday ended, which turned into Sunday, and my dad came back and we finally glued on the weather stripping. So for this, we used this Magic Goop from AutoZone, and I bought 2 tubes of it just in case. We would apply the gasket a little bit at a time, and the instructions said to wait 10 minutes before putting the 2 pieces together. We tried only doing 5 minutes just to rush it, and let's just say that the longer we waited and the closer we got to waited 10 minutes before putting them together, the better it turned out. Wow, the instructions were right. I also made sure to use masking tape to hold the seal in place and apply a little pressure to help it stick real nice. Over the course of an hour or more, we eventually got it all the way on, and it did require both tubes of the goop to accomplish. So then, it was time to put it all back together and call it a weekend. Alright, it's the end of the weekend. Worked on it 2 days, Saturday and Sunday. We worked 6 hours on Saturday and 4 hours today, Sunday, finishing up the weekly projects. The trunk is it looks really nice with the new weather strip on there. I'm really happy with that. But 6 hours plus 4 hours is 10 hours plus 2 people. That's 20 hours of work that went into her this weekend. And not only is the exhaust leak fixed in the front, but look at those brand new sun visors. Very happy with that. So yeah, she's ready to start driving around, especially because the gas tank doesn't leak. So very, very happy. So with this episode coming to an end, it was time to drive it back up into its parking spot in the driveway. Which, this is where I discovered the hard way that something was not right. The car would not idle, and it would barely run when it was not running on all 6 cylinders. I didn't know what was wrong, but I was super annoyed, and I was also just tired at the end of the weekend of working on the Dart that I decided to just leave it there in inoperable condition. But we will deal with it in the next episode, so can't wait to see you there.